Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tuning our frequency to the 1930s. But I want to be clear right off the bat. We aren't just talking about music today. We're not just talking about, catchy tunes or people dancing the Lindy Hop.
No, not at all.
We are talking about a cultural explosion.
It really was a seismic shift. I mean, if you look at the source material, the biographies, the discographies, all the historical accounts, you realize that what happened in 1935 wasn't just a new musical trend.
No.
It was a complete restructuring of American pop culture.
We're talking about the king of swing, Benny Goodman. Now, if you're like me, when you hear that name, you might picture this polite, sort of bespectacled guy in a tuxedo playing the clarinet.
Right, the classic image.
Maybe he looks like a math teacher or, I don't know, an accountant. And
Yeah.
technically you're correct. That is what he looked like. But you are missing the wild, complicated, and frankly, revolutionary story that was going on underneath that tuxedo.
Exactly. We're looking at a pivotal force who changed how America listened, how America danced, and maybe most importantly, how America started to deal with race in the public sphere.
He was such an unlikely hero for a revolution.
A completely unlikely hero.
It's a massive story. We're going to unpack how a poor immigrant kid from the absolute slums of Chicago became this global superstar.
Right.
And we're going to look at how a weird quirk of time zones, I mean, literally just the mechanics of the clock, launched the entire swing era.
And we have to talk about the cost of that success. Because for all the joy you hear in that music, Goodman was known for this paradoxical personality. He was a perfectionist to the point of obsession.
Right.
Famous for something called the Ray, which absolutely terrified his musicians.
Oh, the Ray. I've read about this, and it sounds like actual psychological warfare. We are definitely getting into that.
We have to.
So buckle up. We're diving deep into the life, the music, and the very complicated legacy of Benny Goodman.
Let's start at the very beginning, because the rags to riches element here isn't just some cliche. It's essential to understanding his drive.
I agree.
You cannot understand Benny Goodman without understanding the sheer desperation of his childhood.
Right. So let's set the scene. Benny Goodman was born in 1909 in Chicago. He wasn't just from a humble background. He was the 9th of 12 children.
12 children. Just think about that number. And his parents, David and Dora, were Jewish immigrants from the Russian Empire, specifically from Warsaw and Kaunas.
And they came to the U.S. with almost nothing.
Absolutely nothing. They were escaping persecution, just looking for any kind of foothold they could get.
And they ended up in the Maxwell Street neighborhood. Now, for anyone who isn't familiar with, early 20th century Chicago, paint a picture for us. What did Maxwell Street look like?
It was known as the ghetto. It was an overcrowded slum right near the railroad yards and the factories.
So loud.
Incredibly loud. Imagine the smell of the stockyards, that sort of metallic, bloody scent of the slaughterhouses, just hanging over the neighborhood.
Ugh.
It was smoky. It was packed with immigrants, German, Irish, Italian, Polish, Jewish, all crammed into these tiny tenements.
So no privacy, no money, and just constant noise.
Exactly. The sources described their apartment as just bursting at the seams. And money was a constant crushing problem.
Yeah.
There were days when there wasn't enough heat, days when food was really scarce. But here's what's fascinating to me. In the middle of all that grinding poverty, you have David Goodman, the father.
The father seems like the central figure in this whole early chapter.
He really is. He was a tailor, working endlessly in sweatshops, shoveling snow, doing absolutely whatever he could to make ends meet.
Right.
But he had this vision for his children. He saw the poverty around him, the gangs, the dead-end labor jobs, and he wanted a way out for his kids.
And he decided music was the ticket.
He decided music was the vehicle.
Which is interesting, right?
Right.
Yeah, because today we think of music as such a risky career. It's like, don't become a musician, become a doctor or a lawyer.
Exactly.
But for David Goodman, music was a trade. It was a skilled labor that paid a lot better than digging ditches.
Precisely. He used to take the kids to these free band concerts in Douglas Park on Sundays. And that was Benny's first exposure to live, professional performance.
Wow.
You have to imagine, for a little kid living in a gray, dirty tenement, seeing these men in crisp uniforms playing these shiny brass instruments.
It must have looked like they were from another planet.
It must have looked like dignity, like a way out.
So in 1919, when Benny is 10 years old, the father hears about an opportunity.
He hears about free music classes at the Kehila Jacob Synagogue.
And he jumps on it.
He doesn't hesitate for a second. He marches Benny and two of his older brothers, Harry and Freddie, right down to the synagogue to enroll.
And here is where fate just steps right in. This is one of those classic sliding doors moments in history.
It really is.
If this had gone just slightly differently, the entire sound of the 1930s would have changed.
It's a great story. So picture the scene. It's 1919. The synagogue basement is probably, chaotic, full of shouting kids and tired volunteers.
Right.
And they open up these crates of donated used instruments. This isn't some carefully curated music school. It's basically a supply dump.
It's just a scramble for whatever's in the box.
Essentially. And the distribution was based on one simple metric: physical size.
How big you were.
That's it. Harry, the biggest brother, he gets the tuba.
Because he's the only one strong enough to lift it.
Right. Freddie, the middle brother, he gets the trumpet. And then there's Benny. He's 10. He's the youngest, and he was small for his age. Probably underfed,
Yeah.
A tuba would have literally crushed him.
So what's left in the box for the little guy?
The clarinet. They handed him the clarinet because it was the only thing small enough for him to hold.
Just think about that. I mean, if Benny Goodman had been a growth spurt kid, if he'd been 6 inches taller...
He becomes a tuba player.
He's a tuba player. And jazz history is completely rewritten.
Completely. The tuba is the anchor of the band, right? It's the bass line. It goes oompa, oompa. But the clarinet is a fluid, agile instrument.
It's like a voice.
It's akin to the violin or the human voice. It can scream, it can whisper, it can run up and down scales at lightning speed. That instrument allowed Benny to develop a kind of virtuosity that a tuba simply would not have permitted.
So he gets this clarinet, and it turns out the kid is an absolute prodigy.
A virtuoso from the jump. He took to it immediately. He started taking lessons from Franz Schoupp, who was a classically trained clarinetist with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra.
So this is a key detail.
A very key detail. Benny wasn't just learning jazz by ear. He was learning strict classical technique right from the beginning. He also joined the band at Hull House.
Hull House is legendary in Chicago history. It was a settlement house for immigrants, right?
It was a lifeline. And joining that band gave him the chance to spend 2 weeks at a summer camp. The sources say this was literally his only escape from the slums. For 2 weeks a year, he saw trees, he breathed fresh air, and he realized right then that music was his ticket out of the ghetto.
And he wasn't just playing for fun. He got his union card at 13. 13 years old.
Can you imagine?
He was playing on excursion boats on Lake Michigan, contributing to the family income.
He was a professional musician while he was still in short pants.
Yeah.
He was bringing home money that put food on the table for 12 other people.
That is a heavy, heavy burden for a 13-year-old.
Immense.
But then tragedy strikes. And this, I think, is the moment that really cemented his relentless, almost terrifying drive.
It's the pivotal trauma of his life. He was 17 years old. His career is just starting to take off. He's playing with Ben Pollack's orchestra, making actual recordings.
He's making it.
He is actually making it. And his father, David Goodman, the man who dragged them to the synagogue, the man who dreamed this whole thing up for them.
Yeah.
He steps off a streetcar and is hit and killed by a passing car.
It's just devastating. Benny later called it the saddest thing that ever happened in our family.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of his psyche, his personality, you have to realize his father never saw him become a star.
He never saw the dream come true.
He died just before the breakthrough. And that has to leave a permanent mark.
A huge scar.
It likely instilled this idea in him that music wasn't just a hobby or an art form. It was survival. It was life or death.
Right.
If Benny stopped practicing, if he stopped being the absolute best, the family might starve. They might end up right back in Maxwell Street. Failure was just not an option.
So he carries this weight with him. He moves to New York City. He's doing session work, playing on the radio, playing in Broadway pits.
He's making a good living, especially during the Depression, which is saying something.
It really is.
He's a first-call musician. If you needed a clarinet solo for a recording, you called Benny. But he wanted more. He wanted his own band. And this brings us to the mid-30s and the birth of the swing era.
Now, before we get to the big explosion at the Palomar, we need to explain something technical. Because swing wasn't just a vibe, you know?
Right. It's not just a feeling.
It was a specific musical architecture. Benny Goodman didn't invent it, but you could argue he perfected it. And more importantly, he sold it to America.
Right. And to understand this, we have to talk about Fletcher Henderson.
Okay, so Goodman forms his band, and in 1934, he gets this big radio gig called Let's Dance. He needs music, a lot of it, and he turns to Fletcher Henderson. Who was he?
Fletcher Henderson was a brilliant African-American band leader and arranger. He had an orchestra that played this incredible, driving, powerful music.
But it was the Great Depression.
The Depression just decimated the record industry and the whole touring circuit. So Henderson was deep in debt, and he had to disband his orchestra.
So Goodman, who has this budget from the radio show,
He hires Henderson to write arrangements for his band. Goodman even hired Henderson's own band members to come teach his musicians how to play that style properly.
he basically bought the book of the Henderson Band. But what made those arrangements so special? What is the swing formula?
It's all about call and response. So before this, a lot of jazz was collective improvisation. You know, everyone playing around the melody at once, like in the New Orleans style.
Kind of a musical chaos.
A beautiful chaos,
Right.
but chaos. Henderson organized it. He treated the brass section, the trumpets and trombones, as one voice.
Okay.
And he treated the reed section, the saxophones and clarinets, as another voice.
So they're almost like two choirs talking to each other.
Exactly. The brass shouts a riff, ba-da-ba-da-ba,
Yeah.
and the saxophones answer back, doo-wop, doo-wop. They trade these phrases back and forth over a steady four-on-the-floor rhythm.
It creates this tension.
This incredible tension and release that just makes you want to move. It's an engine. And when Goodman's band, which was drilled to absolute perfection, played these Henderson charts, it was like a high-performance machine.
So he has the band, he has the music, things are looking up, he's on the radio show Let's Dance, playing this hot new music late at night. But then
But then the sponsor pulls out. There's a strike at Nabisco,
the cookie company.
the cookie company. The show is canceled. And suddenly, Goodman has this very expensive band and no gig. So his agents book a cross-country tour to try and keep them afloat.
And frankly, we have to stress this. The tour was an absolute disaster.
It was a catastrophe. You have to remember, in 1935, the popular music in the Midwest and the East was what they called sweet music.
Like Guy Lombardo.
Exactly. Polite, melodic, very gentle dance music. It was pure escapism. People wanted to be soothed during the Depression.
And here comes Benny Goodman playing this aggressive, loud, hot jazz.
And people hated it.
They hated it.
They literally demanded their money back. In Denver, the ballroom manager told them to stop playing that noise or he'd fire them right there on the spot.
Wow.
By the time they reached Pismo Beach, California, the band was completely demoralized. They were broke. They thought the tour was the end of the road.
Imagine the mood on that bus. They're driving across the desert thinking, well, we tried. Guess it's back to session work in New York.
And they arrive in Los Angeles on August 21st, 1935. The Palomar Ballroom.
This is the day.
This is the D-Day of the swing era.
They set up their instruments. They are exhausted. They are expecting another hostile crowd who just wants to hear waltzes.
So Benny, being cautious,
Yeah.
he starts the first set with the sweet stuff, the safe stock arrangements. He's just trying to play it safe, not get booed off the stage again.
And the reaction from the crowd.
Silence. Total indifference. The crowd is just kind of milling around, not dancing. It's looking like another massive failure.
And then the drummer, Gene Krupa, who is a legend in his own right, he looks over at Benny and he says something that should be on a t-shirt.
He says, if we're going to die, Benny, let's die playing our own thing.
That is the moment. I mean, the courage to fail on your own terms.
Yeah. Goodman just nods. He tells the band to pull out the Fletcher Henderson charts. The real stuff.
Yeah.
Kicks off King Porter Stomp.
What happens?
Bedlam. Absolute bedlam. The crowd rushes the bandstand. They're cheering, screaming, dancing like they've lost their minds.
The band must have been in shock.
They were shocked. They're looking at each other like, where do these people come from?
Okay, so why? Why did Los Angeles lose its mind when Denver hated it?
This is my favorite part of the story. It's the time zone miracle.
Well, let's unpack this because it's such a weird, specific technological quirk of history.
So remember the radio show Let's Dance? It was broadcast live from New York City. Goodman's segment, the hot segment with the Henderson charts, it aired late.
Right.
It was on around midnight or maybe even 1 a.m. Eastern time.
So in New York, only the insomniacs and the night owls are hearing it.
Right. But think about the time zones. Midnight in New York
Is 9 p.m. in California.
It's prime time. That's exactly when teenagers are listening to the radio while they're getting ready to go out for the night.
That is incredible. I've never heard that before.
So the kids in California had been listening to Benny Goodman's hot sets for months while doing their homework or hanging out with friends. They knew the arrangements. They knew the solos. They had been waiting for him to arrive.
The geography of the clock created a fan base he didn't even know existed.
He had no idea. And it highlights just how thin the line is between failure and legend.
I mean, if that radio show had been an hour later, or if the tour had stopped in Utah instead of L.A.
Swing might not have happened.
Yeah.
At least not like that.
It's very likely. But it did happen. The media reported the hysteria at the Palomar, and overnight, Benny Goodman was crowned the king of swing.
So now he has the crown. He has the power. And this is where the story shifts from just musical history to social history. Because once he was on top, he started doing things that simply were not done. We need to talk about the color line.
We absolutely do.
Yeah.
And we need to be really blunt about the context here. In the 1930s, the music industry was strictly segregated.
No question.
Black and white musicians might jam together in private, after hours, in some back room. But on stage, in public, absolutely not.
It was illegal in some states.
And it was career suicide in others.
But Goodman cared about one thing and one thing only.
The sound.
The sound. He was obsessed with the sound. He didn't care who made it. He met Teddy Wilson, this elegant, brilliant African-American pianist. And Goodman wanted that sound in his band.
So he hires him, just like that.
Well, not for the big band at first. He creates the Benny Goodman Trio. It was him, Gene Krupa on drums, and Teddy Wilson on piano.
And then he adds Lionel Hampton.
On vibraphone for the quartet. And later in 1939, he adds the great Charlie Christian on electric guitar.
We have to pause on the significance of this. This is 1935, 1936. This is more than a decade before Jackie Robinson broke the color line in baseball.
It's massive. And it wasn't easy. They couldn't travel together comfortably.
Yeah.
When the band toured the South, Teddy Wilson and Lionel Hampton often couldn't stay in the same hotels as the white members.
No.
They couldn't eat in the same restaurants. They'd have to find boarding houses in black neighborhoods.
So was Goodman doing this because he was a civil rights activist? Was he trying to make some big political statement?
The evidence suggests no, not really. He wasn't a marcher. He wasn't giving speeches about equality. He was a pragmatist. He wanted the best musicians on earth, and it just so happened that some of the best were black. But he was fiercely protective of them.
There's a story about a clarinet threat that I love.
It's a classic Goodman story. They were playing a gig, and someone, maybe a promoter, maybe a heckler in the crowd, asked Goodman why he was playing with that N-word, referring to Teddy Wilson.
A horrible racist confrontation.
And Goodman didn't try to reason with him. He didn't try to explain. He just looked the guy dead in the eye and said, "If you say that again to me, I'll take a clarinet and bust you across your head with it."
Simple, direct, and violent if necessary.
Exactly. Lionel Hampton said later that what Goodman did made it possible for black people to get chances in other fields. By putting a mixed band on stage at the height of his fame, he normalized the image of black and white excellence working together.
He forced the audience to listen to the music, not look at the skin color.
He did?
Speaking of excellence, we have to tell the Charlie Christian story. Because if the Palomar is sort of the action movie part of the story, this is the buddy comedy part.
It really is.
Yeah.
So John Hammond, who was this wealthy producer, a talent scout, and basically the architect of Goodman's career, he discovers this guitarist in Oklahoma named Charlie Christian.
No, Charlie Christian is playing an electric guitar. 1939, that's a weird instrument.
It was a total novelty. It looked like a science experiment, you know, a guitar with a cable plugged into a box.
Right.
Benny Goodman hated it.
He hated
it. He thought it was a gadget, not a serious instrument. Plus, Charlie Christian shows up wearing a purple shirt and yellow shoes. Very flashy.
Right.
And Benny, who was always in this perfectly tailored suit, he was just appalled. He refused to even audition him.
So Hammond has to trick him.
He has to set up an ambush.
Yeah.
The band is playing a dinner set at a posh restaurant in Beverly Hills. Hammond sneaks Charlie Christian onto the stage during the break.
No way.
Yes. Goodman comes back from dinner. He walks onto the bandstand, and he sees this kid in the purple shirt sitting there with his electric guitar amp.
Benny must have been absolutely furious.
He was so annoyed. He wanted to embarrass the kid, get him off the stage as fast as possible. So he calls a tune called Rose Room.
Okay.
Now, Rose Room is a tricky, sophisticated piece. Benny assumed this country kid from Oklahoma wouldn't know the chord changes.
Let's see what we've got, kid. A little test.
A test he was supposed to fail. They kick it off. And Charlie Christian doesn't just know it. He owns it. He starts soloing. And the sound coming out of that amplifier was unlike anything anyone had ever heard before.
What was it like?
It was horn-like. It was sustaining, fluid. It was like a saxophone made of electricity.
And Benny, what was his reaction?
Benny stopped trying to embarrass him, and he just started listening. Then he started playing back. They locked in.
Right.
They played that one song, Rose Room, for 45 minutes straight.
45 minutes on one song.
Just trading solos back and forth. The waiters were stopping to watch. The audience was mesmerized. By the time and in that one session, the electric guitar went from being a novelty gadget to being a lead instrument in jazz.
It just shows that for Goodman, the music always won. If you could play, you were in, period.
True. But, and this is the big pivot, being in the band was not a vacation.
No.
This brings us to the paradox of Benny Goodman. We've talked about the hero. Now we have to talk about the villain.
The dark side of perfection.
Goodman was a demanding, sometimes tyrannical taskmaster. He expected absolute note-perfect flawlessness. And when he didn't get it, or even when he just thought he didn't get it, he had a weapon.
The ray.
The ray.
Okay, so the ray. Was this just him giving someone a dirty look? Or was it something more?
I want you to imagine you're on stage. You're a trumpet player. You're in the middle of a solo. And suddenly, Benny Goodman stops playing. He turns to you. He looks over the top of his rimless glasses, and he just stares.
So silence.
Total silence. No screaming, no feedback, just this cold, expressionless, unblinking stare that musicians said seemed to look right through you.
That sounds terrifying.
It made seasoned pros feel like clumsy children.
I have to push back a little here, though. I mean, we hear about tough bosses all the time. Steve Jobs, James Cameron. Was the ray really that bad, or are we just talking about sensitive artists?
It's a fair question.
Yeah.
But you have to understand the psychological isolation of it. He would do this in front of thousands of people, in the middle of a show.
So it's public.
It's public humiliation. And if he was really mad, he would physically move you. He would point to a musician and tell them to move their chair to the back of the stage away from the microphone, essentially erasing them from the performance.
Wow, that's cold.
It is. Helen Forrest, who was one of the greatest vocalists of the entire era, sang with him for about 20 months. She later said it felt like 20 years. She called it a life sentence.
That's a strong statement.
She famously said, "Benny looks at you, but he doesn't see you. He looks through you."
He just treated them like components of a machine.
Exactly. If a valve on an engine is sticky, you replace it. You don't ask the valve how its day was. That was Benny.
But then you have these weird contradictions. The sources mention his secret philanthropy.
Yes. While he was freezing people out on stage with the ray, he was quietly writing checks to put people through college. He paid for medical bills, but he kept it a total secret.
Why hide the kindness? It doesn't make sense.
He was deeply cynical. He said, if they knew about it, everyone would come to me with their hand out. So he built this wall of ice around himself to protect his focus and his wallet.
So he was generous with his money, but incredibly miserly with his emotions.
Perfectly put.
It's a really complex psychological profile, but that relentless, cold perfectionism did lead to the absolute summit of his career. We have to talk about Carnegie Hall.
It's January 16th, 1938. If the Palomar was the birth of swing, Carnegie Hall was its coronation.
For our listeners, we need to contextualize this. Jazz in 1938 was still seen by the establishment as whorehouse music.
That's what they called it.
It was for nightclubs, for dancing, for drinking. Carnegie Hall was a temple. It was for Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. You didn't play drums at Carnegie Hall.
Exactly. It was a massive, massive gamble. Goodman was terrified. He actually tried to cancel the show beforehand.
Really? Why?
He thought nobody would come or that the critics would laugh them out of the building.
Well, the show sold out.
It sold out instantly. And the concert itself, I mean, if you listen to the recording, it's electric. They started out a little stiff, a little nervous. But as the night went on, the energy just built and built.
And it culminates in the final number. Sing, sing, sing.
Oh, that song. Even if you don't think you know it, you know it. The tom-toms. Boom, 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 boom.
It's the anthem of the era.
It is. Yeah. And at Carnegie Hall, they just stretched it out. Gene Krupa played these tribal, thunderous drum solos, and Jess Stacy played this unexpected, delicate, almost impressionistic piano solo right in the middle of all the chaos.
Yeah.
The audience was practically levitating.
It legitimized jazz overnight. It said, this is art, with a capital A.
Precisely. After that night, you couldn't just dismiss swing as a fad for teenagers anymore. It was American classical music.
And there's a great postscript to this concert, because for years, people talked about it, but almost nobody could actually hear it.
That's right. The concert was recorded on acetate discs. These are metal discs coated in lacquer, very fragile, but they were just for archival purposes. Benny took them home and apparently just forgot about them.
Imagine forgetting the master tapes of the most famous jazz concert in history.
It's wild. But fast forward to 1950. Goodman is moving out of an apartment, or his sister-in-law finds them. The story varies a little, but essentially they were found in a closet.
Just sitting in a closet for over a decade.
Sitting in a closet, gathering dust. He listened to them, realized the quality is surprisingly good, and they were released as an LP. The famous 1938 Carnegie Hall Jazz Concert.
And it was a huge hit.
It became the first double album in history and a massive bestseller. It basically resurrected his career in the 50s.
Talk about finding a winning lottery ticket in your old coat pocket. Unbelievable. But time moves on. The swing era didn't last forever. World War II happened, the economy changed, musical taste shifted. In the 40s, we get bebop.
Right. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, fast, frantic, harmonically complex.
So how did the king of swing handle being, well, dethroned?
Not well. He is the king, and suddenly these young guys were changing all the rules of the kingdom. He tried to adapt. He actually hired some bop musicians for a while.
You should get it.
He even said he liked Thelonious Monk.
Really? Monk is so abstract and angular.
He was, but Benny said, I like the way he played. He's got a sense of humor. But generally, Benny struggled. He couldn't get the feel of bebop. He eventually rejected it, saying the musicians didn't know their scales.
The classic old man yelling at cloud moment.
It really was. So he retreated to what he knew. But, and this is where his obsession comes back in a fascinating way, he didn't just rest on his laurels. In 1949, he decided to completely reinvent himself as a classical clarinetist.
The classical overhaul. This part of the story actually makes me cringe physically.
It is visceral. So Benny starts studying with Reginald Kell, a famous British classical clarinetist. And Kell tells him, Benny, your whole technique is wrong. You're using the wrong embouchure.
An embouchure is how you put your mouth on the instrument, for those who don't know.
Right. Benny played with his teeth resting on the top of the mouthpiece. It's a very stable way to play, good for loud, biting jazz sounds. Kell played with what's called a double lip embouchure, covering both your top and bottom teeth with your lips. It creates a darker, mellower sound, but it's much, much harder to control.
So the most famous clarinet player in the world has to basically relearn how to play?
Kell told him, if you want to do this, you have to start from scratch. And Benny had 30 years of calluses on his fingers from playing.
Of course.
Kell said, those have to go.
Oh, no, don't tell me.
Benny Goodman, the king of swing, had his finger calluses surgically or chemically removed. He stripped his hands raw so he could develop the sensitivity of a beginner again.
That is horrific and unbelievably impressive at the same time.
It illustrates the extreme lengths he would go to for musical mastery. He spent months just practicing open tones and scales, sounding like a first-year student, just to master this new technique.
And did he do it?
He did.
Yeah.
He commissioned works from major composers like Aaron Copland and Béla Bartók. He became a respected classical soloist.
It just proves that the ray wasn't only for other people. He turned that same harsh, unforgiving light on himself.
He was always his own harshest critic.
So let's look at the later years. The world has changed completely. It's the Cold War now. And surprisingly, Benny Goodman becomes a kind of weapon in the Cold War.
He does. The State Department decides to send the Benny Goodman Orchestra to the Soviet Union in 1962.
Wow.
And this was right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. The world is terrified of nuclear war.
So they send a jazz band to Moscow to smooth things over.
It was a cultural exchange. The idea was to show the Soviets the freedom and the energy and the joy of American culture. And the Russian people loved it. They were starved for American jazz. They treated him like a god.
But the tour itself, behind the scenes.
A total nightmare. The bassist, Bill Crow, wrote a book about it called To Russia Without Love.
That is a great title.
A great title. It suggests that Goodman was as miserable and difficult as ever. He was old, he was in pain, and he was fighting with the younger, more modern musicians in his band, trying to make them play like it was still 1938.
So even as a diplomat, he couldn't turn off the perfectionism.
Never.
And he kept playing right up to the end, didn't he?
He practiced almost every single day of his life. In 1986, he was 77 years old. He was still working on charts, still practicing. He died of a heart attack while taking a nap on his couch in New York. His clarinet was right there nearby.
He went out as a working musician.
Absolutely. And we should mention, he was married to Alice Hammond, who was John Hammond's sister.
His producer, the guy who found Charlie Christian.
Right. And despite the fact that he and John Hammond fought constantly, Hammond actually quit Columbia Records because he couldn't stand working with Benny anymore. Benny and Alice had a long, stable marriage. It was maybe the one area of his life that wasn't chaotic.
So when we look back at this massive life, from being the ninth child in a Chicago slum, learning clarinet because he was too small for the tuba,
Yeah.
to the Palomar Ballroom, to creating the first integrated band, to Carnegie Hall, what's the final headline?
The headline is that Benny Goodman represents the collision of immense, God-given talent with a very difficult, very human personality. He changed the racial landscape of America not through speeches or marches, but through an uncompromising, relentless demand for the best sound.
He proved that excellence has no color.
Exactly. And he took dance music, pop music, essentially, and he forced the world to recognize it as high art.
Yeah.
He built the bridge between the dance hall and the symphony hall.
It's a heck of a legacy.
It really is.
So I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We talked about the Ray, that intolerant, scary perfectionism. And we talked about how he changed the world. So ask yourself this. Would the swing era even have happened without that obsession? Is the Ray, that intolerance for mediocrity, is that sometimes the necessary price we pay for changing the world?
That really is the question, isn't it?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the King of Swing. We'll see you next time.